My name is Clare Pain and I'm a medical journalist. I've worked for over a decade as a journalist in Australia covering medical news for doctors. And I worked during the pandemic until December 2021. I'm here as part of the Media is the Virus campaign outside BBC Radio Sheffield. What does it mean, the media is the virus? Well, it may mean different things to different people. But what it means to me is that the media during the pandemic has been censoring and putting out propaganda. What's the job of a journalist? There are many sorts of journalists. There are people who write opinion pieces, and that's supposed to spark debate and discussion. There are people who write something or talk on the television and entertain us. But what I'm talking about are impartial news reporters. Those are the journalists I'm talking about now. What's their job? How should they behave? I believe that an impartial news reporter should be seeking the truth and explaining it in a way that people can understand. When I started working at the magazine, the top magazine for doctors in Australia, a wise editor said to me, "Always remember, Claire, we're here for the reader. We're not here for the person we're interviewing. We're here to be as if the reader were interviewing them themselves, to ask the questions that they want to ask." Another job of a news reporter is to make sure that what they're passing on is accurate. I was a science writer journalist, so I had to make sure that I understood the science and the science made sense. A good journalist, if it's a contentious issue, should present the arguments from both sides, or even if there are more than two sides, from all sides. It's not the job of the journalist to make decisions for us about which side is right. It's their job to present the information and we make our own minds up. What else should a journalist do? They should call out abuses of power. One of our key roles as a journalist is to watch out for governments and big companies and city councils that are abusing their power. A medical writer is there to understand and explain the science. And if it doesn't make sense to the medical writer, then we have to ask the authors of it and get it explained. One thing that a news journalist has to do as well as that is to watch out for potential conflicts of interest. When I was covering medical stuff, potential conflicts of interest were watching out for the sticky fingers of Big Pharma. So quite often I'd be writing up a study that had been done and paid for by a pharmaceutical company. This was before COVID. There's nothing wrong with that. But whenever we wrote it up for our doctor readers, we would make quite clear at the bottom that this study was funded and paid for by the company that makes the drug and profits from it. That way our readers had a little thought in their mind, perhaps this might be a little bit rose painted, looking better than it is. Another thing is that a journalist should not be an activist. I feel that the BBC and Channel 4 are full of people who are not journalists. They're full of people who are activists that have an agenda. The only thing that a journalist should be an activist about is finding the truth. During the pandemic, as I worked in Sydney writing for doctors, some very strange things happened. Suddenly there were labels. Some words I'd never heard before were being bandied about all over the media and social media. These words were disinformation, misinformation, anti-vaxxer, conspiracy theorist. I hate all those words because those words are labels. Those labels are there to block us from thinking, to stop us from thinking. If something has been labelled as misinformation, we don't have to read it. We don't have to listen to it and make our own minds up about it. It's nonsense. It's misinformation. We can ignore it. We don't have to think. This labelling is the sort of nasty thing that went on in Nazi Germany, in Soviet Russia, and during the Cultural Revolution in China. Labelling things misinformation and disinformation, that is the sort of a tool of a totalitarian regime. So why is that happening in Western democracies like the UK and Australia? The trouble is, after 3 years of our big media outlets like the BBC talking about misinformation and disinformation as if it's an evil thing that we must be on guard to fight off like a vampire, sadly most of the general public, most of us, have been indoctrinated to believe that. You know what I think? I think let people say their misinformation and disinformation. The truth will always out. And if what the government has done during the pandemic with lockdowns and vaccines was the best thing, then that will stand up to scrutiny. The government should ask for that to be scrutinised, confident that they made the right choices. And scrutinised it should be and should have been throughout the pandemic by the media. The truth is not some weak thing that needs to be protected. The truth is a strong sword. If the truth is indeed true, it will cut through all the nonsense and gobbledygook, so there's no need for censorship. To me, if there's censorship, and this organisation has been censoring, it's very worrying. Let people make up their own minds about whether information seems right or not. We're not children who need to be protected, we're adults. I believe also that stamping on free speech has been one of the most terrible crimes in the last 3 years. And to their shame, the mainstream media have absolutely led the way in doing this. They have led a witch hunt against anyone who dares to question what the government recommended at any stage. They have done their best to stoke the fear. I'm a journalist. I know that fear brings clicks. Instead of that, they should have been doing their job and asking questions all the time on behalf of the public they serve. They should have been seeking the truth. They should have been holding Boris, Matt Hancock, Sage, Chris Whitty and Patrick Vallance to account every step of the way. And it has not just been the TV and newspapers that have been censoring. Social media has been a shocker, deplatforming people on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. Many of us who have questioned the narrative are sick to death of those little warning banners that get put onto our posts, directing us to outdated and incorrect information put out by government health departments. So what should we do? Stop watching the mainstream TV news. Stop buying the mainstream newspapers. Shun Facebook and YouTube. Search out your own information and come to your own conclusions. Complain to the BBC, ITV and Channel 4 if you think their content is biased. Complain to Ofcom, the media regulator. Talk and debate and discuss what's going on with your family and friends. Speak up.